So the question is, how much is too much power in an eMTB? Today, I think we're going to find that out. This is the brand new Falcon S by a brand you might not have heard of, called Cyke. Every time I say that brand name, I feel like it's a play on words, because it reminds me of the old school NES game Excitebike. And to be honest, the Falcon S kind of has a look that's beefy enough to be an Excitebike bike. Okay, so let's start off with some of the basics on this bike before we go into the horsepower that this bike has. The Falcon S is the 29er version of the Falcon series. You can also get the Falcon A, which is going to be a 27.5 by 3 inch wide tire setup, and a Falcon X, which is going to be a 26 by 4.8 inch wide tire setup. For my riding style, I definitely prefer a 29er, and so I picked up the Falcon S. This bike not only has 29-inch wheels, it has some of the beefiest tires I have ever seen on a mountain bike. They are Maxxis branded, downhill ready, 3-inch wide monsters. Both front and back are Minion tires. The front is the DHF and the rear is the DHR. This is going to give you so much grip on any terrain that you ride on. They also have the nice EXO sidewalls for extra protection from sharp rocks. Next up on this bike is the frame. This bike has an impressive wheelbase of 52 inches. Now this is one of the longest e-bikes that I've ever ridden, but it also has an aggressive 64-degree head tube angle and a 74.3-degree seat tube angle. I found all of these dimensions make this bike super confidence inspiring on downhills and very comfortable when pedaling throughout the trails. I personally went with the size 19, but you can get this in a size 17 if you're a little bit shorter. I'm 5'11", and the 19 feels like it fits me really well. The Falcon S has two colors to pick from. I have personally been on a bright bike kick lately, so I picked up the flame orange and absolutely love it, but you can get this in a dark blue also. Now Cyke wanted to do their first eMTB correctly, and they went with an air suspension. A lot of brands that are kind of off brands don't tend to do this, but Cyke did. They went with an impressive 150 millimeters of travel both front and back, which is the perfect travel for a bike of this style, and it's definitely an all-mountain setup for sure. Now up front, you're going to get a 150 millimeter RockShox Recon SL. I've ridden this fork on several different bikes, and it's proven to be a tank of a fork, and it can hold up to the demands of an experienced rider or a brand new rider. One of the downfalls of this fork is it's a little bit heavy, but this bike is already so beefy you hardly even notice it. Now, a few benefits of the RockShox Recon fork is that it's an air suspension, so you can dial this into your particular rider weight to get a super smooth feel. Not only that, this has rebound adjustment, and you can even lock out this fork if you desire to. The rear suspension is just as good with 150 millimeters of travel also, and a similar adjustment setup to the RockShox fork up front. After riding this bike for a few weeks, I can say this setup feels really comfortable and responsive. Plus, the nice part is if you want to, you can actually upgrade this bike. They really built this like a modern mountain bike, so you don't have to worry about it having proprietary parts or old setups where you can't upgrade it. This one, the suspension can be fully upgraded down the road. As for the shifting setup on this, they did go with a SRAM X5 9-speed setup. This works just fine, but it would have been nice to see a minimum of a 10-speed with a clutched rear derailleur. This X5 rear derailleur doesn't have a clutch built in, which does give it a little bit more noise out on the trail. Now, again, just like the suspension, this can be completely upgraded if you want to down the road. Now, one of the most important things on any bike is definitely the stopping power, and you get some nice 4-piston hydraulic brakes made by Tektro. Now, this brake system does come with motor cutoff switches, which I'll dive into further down in the video. So now on to the biggest aspect of this bike, the massive 1100 watt peak power Bafang motor. This motor puts out a massive 160 Newton meters of torque. That is 40 more Newton meters than the brand new DJI motor that just came out, and 75 more Newton meters than the Shimano or the Bosch motor that I've ridden in the past. And to tie into that huge motor, they put in a massive 960 watt hour battery with LG cells, making this one of the biggest batteries on any eMTB on the market. With all this power, how is this bike even trail legal? Most trails these days require a minimum of a Class 1 e-bike. The Bafang motor has an app that will allow you to dial in the power, so if you want this to be a Class 1 750 watt e-bike, you can easily do that. You can simply remove the throttle, go into the app, and set the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. Once you do that, it tells the motor to have a nominal power of 750 watts instead of 1000. You are still going to get a much higher peak power, but a Class 1 e-bike is a maximum of 750 watts of nominal power. So this bike, once put down to 20 miles an hour, falls into that Class 1 territory. But if you want to unleash the absolute beast in this bike, you can simply go in and set that speed all the way up to 99, and you'll be hitting speeds of upwards of 35 miles an hour with the throttle out on the road. So my experience with this bike so far has been primarily all single track trail on the Class 1 mode. On my first ride, I quickly found some issues with the bike overall, and those issues were all stemmed from the cutoff switches that you'll find on the shifter and on the brakes. When riding trails, I don't want to have the motor cutoff switches activated whenever I'm shifting or whenever I'm braking. Having both of these on their stock made it super hard to ride on technical trails. So after my first ride, I came home and quickly disabled the cutoff switches. Now in order to disconnect the cutoff switch for the shift sensor, you are going to have to drop the motor. The shift sensor no longer sends the signal to the motor saying, hey, I've shifted, time to cut off the motor. This will allow you to get quick shifts in whenever you're going up super technical terrain without having to worry about losing power instantly. The next cutoff switch is going to be for the brakes, and anytime you barely touch the brakes, the motor would actually cut off, and that was driving me absolutely crazy. Because me personally, when I go around corners, I prefer to feather the brakes, and I don't want to lose that instant power. This one is a little bit easier to get to, but still required some maintenance. You just remove the battery with the key. Once the battery's popped out, you then remove 4 bolts and the locking hinge from the actual bike. Once you've done that, you can pull that out where you'll see 2 cables that have yellow tips on them. Those are the ones that you want to disconnect. Now your bike has 0 cutoff switches and you can ride this like a traditional eMTB. Now definitely you're going to want to use caution with this. This is not something that I recommend if you're not experienced riding an eMTB, because this motor is extremely powerful and those cutoff switches are there for a reason. So if you plan on doing this, do this at your own risk. This is not a how-to. This is basically how I prefer to ride this bike. Now, after getting all the cutoff switches disabled, I wanted to tune this motor just a little bit more. So I wound up downloading the Bafang app, synced it up to my bike, and I was able to get in there and set the actual pedal engagement to 0. This was defaulted in at 11 degrees, so with this engagement setting, it tells the bike when to kick on the motor after the pedals have moved a certain amount of degrees. 11 degrees felt like a little bit too much. I probably could have gone with a little bit more than 0, but I love that instant engagement that you get whenever you have this set down to 0. 5 degrees would probably be just fine. 11 was just a little bit too much for technical trails. Now with these settings all taken care of, I went back out to the trail and this bike truly came to life. The power even in Class 1 mode was unreal. There was literally no hill that would stop this bike. It just climbed everything that I threw at it. And after getting all of that stuff set up and feeling this bike really come to life, I could focus on the feel of this bike overall. The suspension felt super smooth over rough terrain and even felt really good over some smaller jumps. I would almost classify this bike as a motocrosser's eMTB. If you're used to the heavier weight of a motocross bike, the heavier weight of this bike is going to feel probably pretty natural for you. This bike just feels super beefy, it feels super tough, and it feels like it wants to climb the steepest hills on the roughest terrain. It's like one of those arrogant athletes that just goes on and on about how good they are, but really, they actually are pretty good. This bike is a very cocky athlete that can actually do what it claims it can do. I would definitely say fun is an understatement for this bike. At $3,200, this bike is an absolute beast of a bike. Now I do have a few things that I would like to see. I would love to see tubeless ready wheels, a clutch rear derailleur, and easy access to turn on and off or unplug the cutoff switches. That extra work to get this to feel like a regular eMTB really was a little bit more than what I expected it to be. So overall, my thoughts on the Cyke bike is that this bike is a big, beefy bike. This bike is designed for someone, like I said, who is a motocross style rider that's transitioning over to an eMTB. You're going to get beefy tires, great suspension. You're going to get that nice heavier weight, so it's going to be able to just tear through some rough sections with no problems whatsoever. And for somebody who wants to have zero issues climbing any hill, this 160 Newton meter Bafang motor will absolutely do that. But with all that said, guys, I've got some killer upgrades coming your way for this particular bike that I think are going to make this bike even better in the long run. So if you guys want to see that, make sure you stick around, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and definitely leave me a like if you've enjoyed this video, if you're excited about the upcoming upgrades, and also if you like this super big, beefy 160 Newton meter motor. But until next time, get out there and ride your bike.